weeks ago, we tackled a topic that is covered in the Bible that ended up making its way to the big screen. The account of the Exodus, which was poorly depicted in the 2014 movie Gods and Kings. That same year, there was another movie that was released that covered a different biblical account, and that was the global flood, which details the sovereignty of God and Noah's faith and obedience. So it was a story of Noah. In the 2014 movie Noah, there was no shortage of creative license that was taken. It was actually taken to a whole new level of creative licensing. Not only was Noah and his family spared from the flood according to the movie, but there is a stowaway that actually makes his way into the ark by carving a hole into the side of it, and he makes his way into it. Granted, he doesn't quite make it out of the flood. His tail manages to be pretty shortened as he is killed inside the ark. But once again, in the movie, that is supposedly what takes place. Not only that, but one of the most disturbing things about the 2014 movie Noah is that Noah is presented as this demented individual that as soon as he gets into the ark and realizes that one of his daughter-in-laws is going to have a daughter, he actually ends up attempting to kill his granddaughter within that ark. And not to mention that Ham's significant other is carelessly trampled by all the people that are going to die in the flood, and Noah seems to really care less about this situation. To say that the movie is unbiblical, similar to Gods and Kings, it is beyond unbiblical. There is nothing really to ground it in. Some can make the argument and say, well, it's semi-biblical because if you incorporate the book of Enoch, which is not part of the canon, and we've talked about that in the past as to why the book of Enoch is not part of the Bible. But if you were to incorporate that, then you could say, well, it states somewhat true to that line, which is a reason that Enoch is not part of the Bible. That's one of the many reasons. But one of the things that it follows in the storyline of the book of Enoch is that in the beginning, and even throughout the movie, you will see these giant stone creatures that are described as the Watchers. And the Watchers are really fallen angels who have rebelled against the Creator, God, which is the way that throughout the movie, God is described as the Creator, which is not inaccurate. Once again, that follows the storyline somewhat of the book of Enoch, but it's not really following the biblical account. As I stated already, it's extremely unbiblical, and similar to what I said regarding the 2014 movie, Gods and Kings, I highly recommend that you stay away from it. I think that there's a lot more junk that you could probably watch that's more entertaining than that. However, it is interesting, though, to note that mainstream production companies are actually taking interest in the Bible. They're wanting to make movies that are grounded in biblical teachings. Even though they do a poor job at conveying the biblical account, they do a phenomenal job at the graphics, but they do a poor job at it. It's interesting that there is this craving to kind of put out some of these movies and push this ideology that's based on Scripture, but it's extremely manipulated to be completely the opposite. And one of the things that most producers, and I think most people that make these movies would say, is that they don't believe that they are fact. They actually believe that they're more on the fringe of fiction, or they are completely fiction and myth, which is interesting that they try to promote these movies. So it's interesting that, once again, in the year 2014, these two movies came out, and there are no shortage of incredible and supernatural events recorded in the Bible that can keep these production companies from continuing to put out movies. Once again, companies that are skeptics and will continue to criticize the Christian faith. One of the things that, as you read in the Bible, you will find, and we've talked about this throughout the series. Once again, we're on week 12. We've tackled Jonah and the big fish. We've tackled Sodom and Gomorrah. We've tackled a lot of different unique stories recorded in the Bible. But I believe that out of every supernatural biblical account described, I believe that this is one of the easiest supernatural events that can actually be validated through historical and even extra biblical evidence. Now, some people may scoff at that and say, I don't think there's really that much evidence. But there is. A number of years back, we went through a series called Deconstruction. And in this series, we talked about topics that are quote-unquote contradictions of the Bible, or if not, different things that will undermine people's faith. They feel like, well, there's not enough evidence to believe the Bible, so they begin to deconstruct their faith. Rather than building it up, they begin to tear it apart. And this could be claims of lack of evidence, culturally awkward or offensive practices, like women wearing head coverings, which we talked about as well throughout this message series. And once again, so-called contradictions of the Bible. Now, during this series, we actually delved into the account of Noah's Ark pretty deeply. And we're not going to do that today in regards to what we did back then, but some people may be aware of this. I would say that a number of people within the faith community are not aware of this. But many people, whether aware of it or not, they know that Noah's Ark is not unique to the Bible. As a matter of fact, there are many other religions and historical writings that describe a global flood and an individual or individuals alongside of animals who are spared from destruction after being instructed by a higher power to build a vessel so that they could ride out this flood. So once again, the Christian Bible is not unique in this account, as there are many religions and different historical civilizations that have a flood account. Once again, I'm not going to do a repeat of that sermon, but one specific account that is typically used, it's actually the one that most people would say that's the nail in the coffin to disprove that Christianity is unique, and it's true, would actually be the Epic of Gilgamesh, where most people argue that the Epic of Gilgamesh actually predates the Noah account. They would say that actually was recorded before Noah was even written. Now, once again, I'm not going to go through it because I thoroughly covered it throughout that message, but it's bogus. As a matter of fact, as you begin to look at it, the Epic of Gilgamesh, to some extent, is a historical writing that originally may predate, but the flood account is added later into that narrative. So realistically, you can't say that the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood account, predates the Noah account. And so there's a lot of issues with that. But I state that because even though some people may feel like, well, if there's other religious texts, historical texts, and even other civilizations that have that same account, what makes the Bible true, right? So for a second, I want to move away from that, which I'm going to address, but I want to move away from it, and I want you to see this through the lens of evidence. This is going to help us to understand, once again, understanding that there are many historical civilizations, religious texts, and everything else. This will help us to understand that there is so much evidence outside of the Bible to record that at one point in history, there was an account of a global flood where a person was spared, regardless whether it's Gilgamesh, whether it's whatever individual figure with whatever name. Every single region that this has been taught, there is always a vessel that is used, people that are spared, and there is always some divine intervention in this. You have so much evidence to support that, once again, this is historical text to support that there was such an event, right? What makes the Bible more credible? We're going to talk about that. But just think of it for what it is. There is so much evidence to support that there was a global flood in history. And once again, that's just one of the many pillars that will help us to understand that there's so much evidence to support what the Bible claims. Now, this is one reasonable way to assume that there was a global flood. Once again, you have historical text after historical text that's recording these details that are similar. One of the things that you will find is, so we have Officer Milo, who once again, this is something that takes place within detective work, and I would say even within his field of work. but Milo is a police officer here in Wadena. And one of the things that would happen is if there's a crime, there is always an investigation, and you try to get as many witnesses as possible. And if everybody collaborates the same details, even if they differ in some aspects, you begin to form the idea of what is true, right? And that's what we're seeing. There's all these historical texts that are claiming the same thing. So which one's true? And that's what we're talking about. Now, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're not going to be sizing up the biblical account against the other historical texts, as we already did that in that series a number of years back. But we're going to do what we've been doing throughout this series, and that is that we'll be looking at three key things. Looking into the details that may partially answer how this naturally happened. Once again, God can work within the ability of what's naturally possible, but there is still a supernatural divine aspect to it. Secondly, we're going to be looking at to why God allowed this to happen, right? Why does God allow this to take place? And the last thing is we are going to be looking into any details, any and all the details, that are going to allow us to discern, to be able to tell apart whether mainstream views of the biblical account have any merit. Let me reiterate that. Let me put it in a different way. We are going to be looking at the details that will help us to debunk the proposed ideas from mainstream science of what they believe Noah's flood actually was. So before we actually dive into some of these key verses that we're going to be going through fairly quickly regarding the biblical flood account, I want to play a quick clip from a YouTube channel that I really enjoy watching. It's actually called The Y-Files. I am not putting it out there as a plug for you to go and look it up. So just a few disclaimers. AJ, who is the host of the show, admits that he is by no means a religious person. He does state that often in the channel. I don't always agree with some of the views that he holds, but I appreciate that one of the things that he does is he does have the different views regarding the topics that he's covering. So he doesn't just say, this is what I believe to be true. He actually looks at all the evidence and says, this is what other people believe, and this is what I hold to be true. As you're going to hear at the end of the clip, this is one view regarding the flood account or theory that he's sharing, but he's not in agreement with. So this is, what you're going to watch is really, he's explaining one of the views that people have that try to explain how Noah's flood actually took place.
For thousands of years, believers and skeptics have debated the scale of the flood, or even if it occurred at all. Some have argued the biblical flood was not a global event, but a local one. The best-known theory to support this is the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. First proposed in 1997, it argues the Black Sea was a freshwater lake around 260 feet lower than it is today. It was cut off from the Mediterranean Sea by a rocky sill in the Bosphorus Strait. Then, around 8,400 years ago, the Laurentide ice sheet collapsed, causing an abrupt sea level jump. This sent a catastrophic inflow of Mediterranean seawater over this natural dam and into the Black Sea. Almost 40,000 square miles of land were flooded. This significantly expanded the shoreline to both the north and the west. 200 times the flow of Niagara Falls poured through every day, and each day the level of the Black Sea rose several feet. And this continued for 300 days, creating the Black Sea as we know it today. Undersea surveys have revealed human-made structures. The remains of freshwater fish have also been found. The memory of this massive flood could have been passed down through the generations. Then it was finally documented in flood narratives found in both the Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh and the Book of Genesis. So there's evidence of a local flood, which would have been the entire world to the people living there. But how about an actual global flood? A flood that affected every part of the earth? Skeptics claim the biblical flood could not have occurred because there's no actual evidence for a global flood. With all due respect, those skeptics are wrong.
Once again, that's the view, right? That you have an area that was flooded, and that's what is recorded in the Bible. And this is one view that some skeptics, and unfortunately even people within the faith community, churches, believe that the flood that is described in the Bible is, right? It was a local flood, not a catastrophe that impacted the whole world. But there's a few details that are missing, right? I think one of the things that people within the church, people within the faith community try to do is these accounts that are so bizarre, so unique, so extravagant, they try to figure out a way that they could maybe minimize the uniqueness of it so they don't sound as crazy. I believe that a global flood occurred. That sounds crazy. And I think that God had something to do with it. That sounds crazy. However, when we come under that idea that it was a local flood, we actually begin to sound really dumb. And the reason why is because when you begin to see the story, it doesn't match up to what the Bible is describing. Because there's a couple of details that we're going to go through where the Bible is clear that this was something that impacted the entire globe. It was not a regional flood, it was a global one. And there's a number of pretty straightforward issues with the theory that it was a regional one. So right off the bat, right, let's think about just the obvious. Right off the bat is, why did Noah have to build an ark to ride out a flood when God could have just told him, hey, move up away from that region because I want to destroy it? Why spend so much time building something that ultimately it doesn't really matter? Why do you spend so much time building something when you could just move away from that region? Once again, that's not the type of flood that is described. And maybe some could say, well, it was just an issue of faith. God was testing him to see if he would do it. But it's going to present a second issue. How many of each kind of animal did God tell Moses to bring into the ark? Huh? Actually, you're wrong. It wasn't Moses, it was Noah. That was just a test to see if you were paying attention. But Noah was asked to bring 2 of each kind of animal into the ark, right? Now, the issue with this is, why bring animals into the ark when, once again, they could just migrate away from the flood? A local flood would not require a repopulation of all species. That doesn't even make sense. Not only that, but check out what Genesis chapter 9, verse 19 states in regards to repopulation after this flood. It says, from these 3 sons of Noah came all the people who now populate the earth. Well, that can't be a regional flood, because this is suggesting that everybody else died, so everybody stems back to these 3 sons of Noah. How can everybody living today be traced back to Noah's 3 sons when it was a regional flood? That makes no sense. Do you understand how we begin to undermine our own beliefs when we say, no, that does make sense. It's a regional flood. That makes no sense. And I'm not suggesting that it's not difficult to envision how the planet could be covered by water all the way through. I know that it's difficult to even begin to imagine it. But the Bible gives us details as to how this happened. And this is one part, this is the only part probably that the movie Noah got right. And it was depicted in the opening clip. But in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, it states that when Noah was 600 years old, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, all the underground waters erupted from the earth, and the rain fell in mighty torrents from the sky. So now it's giving us details. This is how it's taking place, that the earth is going to flood. And it's tempting, once again, to reiterate everything that we covered last time, because it's a lot more detailed into the global flood according to other narratives, right, within history. But I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to share a few key details. In a nutshell, here are some of the things that I talked about last time during the series Deconstruction that really helped to capture what we see taking place during Noah's time. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7 indicates that the Lord warned Noah, and this is what it says, about things that had never happened before. Okay, this is key. What happened during Noah's time, what he was warned about, was something that had never happened before. The conditions that were going to be present during Noah's time is nothing that had ever happened. Now, with that being said, we've talked a number of times about this. One of the theories that is proposed regarding what caused this deluge of water, these torrential rains to fall, is something known as a canopy theory. Now, there's a lot of things that really factor into, into Not only the global flood, but also what happens afterwards. You have people that are living 900, 800, 700 years before the time of Noah. After Noah, people start dying off a lot quicker until we get to 120 years. Now, the canopy theory states that before the flood, there was actually a canopy of water, almost like a greenhouse effect, that allowed people to live longer because it was covering some of the radiation that would have been hitting the earth. Now, there's problems with this theory, but I believe that it holds some merit to it. Regardless of it, we are told that during Noah's time, there is torrential rains. There's a lot of water falling from the sky. But there's a second thing that we are told about. It says that the waters of the deep, right, underground waters erupted. Picture Old Faithful, right? Picture geysers just like breaking through, and it's flooding the earth. So even though we can say, well, I can't picture it, you don't have to picture it because it hadn't happened before, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to happen again. As a matter of fact, God says that he will never flood the earth again. He's not going to destroy it that way. But nonetheless, we see that's how God did it. There is divine intervention, there is natural processes, and that is how God carries out this flood. And once again, some skeptics will state that it is difficult to imagine how you can get that much water to flood the earth. But we get the torrential rain and the waters that are erupting from underground. That's a natural explanation. But again, it cannot be separated from the divine origin. God is the one that is doing this. It is through God's power and sovereignty that this event takes place. Which leads to the next question from skeptics and believers alike, right? Why? Why does God do this? And there's two reasons for this question, I believe. For the believer, this is a question that really tries to reconcile our perspective with God's revelation. Like, okay, well, I know that God is good. I know that God is merciful. Why is God doing this, right? And I don't think it's a question of that's really upfront and really trying to discredit God. It's a question of trying to reconcile both. For the skeptic, this is definitely a question of debate and anger that seeks to undermine the validity of God's goodness because he carried out such a destruction. Why would God do this? That doesn't even make sense, right? You say that God is good, that God is loving, that God is merciful, yet God does this, right? There's two perspectives. Why does God do this? And this is what Genesis chapter 6, verses 5 through 7 state. It says that the Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth. And he saw that everything they thought or imagined was constantly and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. There is a lot that is packed in those verses, and I wish that we could really go in depth into them, because I'm sure that there's plenty of questions going through your mind. But I hope that we can dig into it a little bit later. Unfortunately, we just don't have time for it today because we're still covering this topic. But one of the things that the Bible is clearly conveying is that people are evil, and God is not destroying innocent people, but wicked people who constantly entertain evil and carry it out. That's what they're doing, right? They're thinking about evil things, and they're doing evil things. And this is a reason for the worldwide global reset, right? We're going to start over again. This is one topic where people try to question and challenge God's morality, right? God doesn't seem very moral. As a matter of fact, he doesn't seem very omniscient. He doesn't seem like he knows everything. Because it is hard to read where it says, I will wipe this human race I have created. And then if you continue to read, it says, he was sorry that he ever made them. Now, here's the issue. Why would God be sorry to create something that he would have already known that that they were going to fail the test? Right? And some people would say, that doesn't sound like a very sovereign God. It doesn't sound like a very merciful God either, because why would he want to destroy people that are ultimately lost? And I'm going to give the quick answer, and that's the reason that I said I wish I could go more into depth into this topic, because there is a great explanation for it. But I'm just going to give you the nutshell of, and really a synopsis of the answer. And it's going to be offensive. And I really don't care if it's offensive, because it's true. God owes me, God owes you no explanation. And here's the reason why. Because it's his creation and he gets to do whatever he wants with it. Now, that doesn't make sense for some people. It sounds like a really weak argument, but let me just switch the role. Imagine somebody showing up to your house and you're in the middle of creating something, right? Let's just pretend that it's a masterpiece that you're thinking about and you're envisioning. You're in your shop, you're working at it. Somebody shows up and you're about to just grab it and destroy it because it's not exactly what you thought it was. And the person comes and, hey, you have no right to be doing that. Would you be happy that they told you that, or would you be irritated, right? Because it's not their creation, it is yours. You get to do whatever you want with your creation because it is yours. God, as the creator of the earth, the universe, and everything in it, he owes us no explanation for what he chooses to do with his creation. Now, it seems unfair to us to some extent because we are the recipients of whatever he chooses. But nonetheless, as creator, and if we were to switch the role, we would see it as unfair for somebody else to tell us how we should deal with our own creations. We set a double standard for God, right? Well, if somebody did it to me, that's wrong. If we do it to you, we have a valid question for you that you have to answer. And once again, I'll say it again. Whether it is hard to accept or not, as creator, God owes us no explanation. But here is the key thing, and once again, I wish we could dive more into it. I can't. But this verse is not revealing this unexpected regret as if God didn't know that this was going to take place. That's not what it's saying. We have to understand that the Bible is a revelation where God is revealing his character and he is divinely inspiring everything that is written. However, when it is written, it is also written by men who are writing it according to our understanding. And one of the things that we see is that God is omniscient. He is all-knowing. What this is conveying, right, what it's trying to tell us in this passage is that the extent of humanity's spiritual brokenness is so bad that the Father is mourning seeing his children giving into wickedness. That's what it's telling us. Now, you could interpret it however you want to, but that's not what it is. What it's telling us is, as a parent, there is nothing that is more heartbreaking than seeing your kids who you have raised, who you have given life to, who you know that are walking away from you. That's what it's revealing. That God mourned because he saw that the creation he had given life to constantly thought about evil things. They're destroying each other. And it's a corrupt world. It's not what he created. But he has given humanity free will. You have the choice. And then underneath all this, it says in verse 8, but Noah found favor with the Lord. And this is where everything begins to shift. It says that by faith Noah built the ark according to the dimensions that were given to him by God. And we're going to come back to that shortly. This is where the details that are revealed here in the Bible are going to help us to discern, to be able to pick out whether what the theory that is proposed, right, that it was a regional flood, is actually true or if it's at odds with the Bible. Now, according to the mainstream view, which you already saw that short clip of, some speculate that the flood described in the Bible was nothing more than an event that was confined to a certain environment or a region. It was contained within an area, which means that the water leveled off. If there was water to erupt right now, if we were to say it covered the entire city of Wadena, that's a region. But there's walls, right? So in other words, it would be leveled off at some point. That's what they're claiming, right? This regional flood was not something that covered the whole earth. It was confined somehow in some space. However, this is what Genesis chapter 7, verses 17 through 20 state. For 40 days the flood waters grew deeper, covering the ground and lifting the boat high above the earth. As the waters rose higher and higher above the ground, the boat floated safely on the surface. Here's a key verse. Finally, the water covered even the highest mountains on the earth. That's key. But then it says, rising more than 22 feet above the highest peak. That makes the theory that it was local impossible. The entire surface of the earth is covered. And as stated in the opening clip, maybe Noah just perceived it to be the entire world as he knew it. However, the passage states that the water rose more than 22 feet above the highest peak. A regional event could not be confined if there is water 22 feet above the highest peak. That would be dumb. There would have to be an invisible barrier 22 feet high so that the water doesn't go over. Because water just continues to pour over until everything is leveled off. That's the way that water works. One thing that I have pointed out multiple times as well is how seashells have actually been found on the top of the highest peak on earth, which is Mount Everest. And here's the picture of it. Now, within the region that is known as Comolinga limestone, that's the top right there. You kind of see how it's brownish on the very top. This is something that they have found, and they actually have found shells. They have found a type of fish that is extinct now. And they have found multiple other things that don't belong up in the peaks. They actually belong in the water. And interestingly enough, they're not underneath water. They're in the top, in the highest peak on earth, right? And this is not only true of the Himalayas, but you can actually find seashells and other aquatic remnants, excuse me, in caves in South Dakota. If you go to the area of Mount Rushmore, you could go to the caves there. They will tell you there is a shell right here. How do shells get into a cave in the middle of South Dakota? It's hard to imagine. You could go down to Mexico and you will see the same thing. It doesn't matter what part of the world you go in. You will see that there is aquatic life in places that it does not belong in. And once again, there's no shortage of explanations or possible explanations of how this happens. So I'm going to state what I've been saying all over throughout the series. No evidence will ever be sufficient to convince a skeptic that is looking to discredit the claims of the Bible. They will try to explain it away. Which brings us to the final point for today, and that is, what if we actually found the ark, right? Would you believe then? If we actually found the ark, would that be enough evidence to convince a skeptic? So in Genesis chapter 8, verse 4, it discloses the location where we should begin to look. Exactly 5 months from the time the flood began, the boat came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. So you don't even need to be a good archaeologist, right? You don't need to be Dora the Explorer. You just need to actually know where to start looking. You need to have a good map. A map that is more reliable than Siri. And that's exactly what people have done to look for the ark. They went to the mountains of Ararat in search of Noah's ark. And some of you may be familiar with it as it has been highly publicized throughout the years. But it is stated that the ark has been discovered in the exact region where the Bible states. And this is what that discovery looks like, right? So those are the mountains of Ararat, and then down there in the bottom you see this unique formation that looks exactly like a giant boat. Now, here's the question, right? We just asked, what if we found Noah's ark? Would people believe? If it truly has been found, it doesn't appear that discovery made many believers out of skeptics. People are still skeptical of the Bible. As a matter of fact, skeptics continue to insist that it is not the ark, but it is just a natural formation due to lava flows from that region. That's a pretty insane formation, right? I mean, of lava, which has a lot more details that I'll cover quickly. And is there a way to prove that it is Noah's ark? Another detail that we get in Genesis chapter 6, verse 14 through 16 is this blueprint that God is giving Noah as to how to build the ark. And it says, make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. Excuse me. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its breadth, 50 cubits, and its height, 30 cubits. Make a roof and for the ark and finish it with a cubit above and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it lower second and third decks. Sounds confusing. That's the ESV for you. We get measurements, but they may as well be in metric system because we Americans don't understand anything but inches and feet, right? So if you're into math, here's the way that you convert it over. The way to figure it out as to how we get to feet is by multiplying the number that is given in cubits by 18 inches, which is the length of a cubit, and then divide that by 12, which will give you the feet that you need. Or the easiest way to do it is just switch over to the translation, the New Living Translation, where it actually does the figuring for you, and it says, build a large boat from cypress, gopher wood, and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls through its interior. Now I'm going to come back to that little add-on of gopher because that's mine, but I'll come back to it because the ESV stated gopher. Here it's a cypress, so I'll come back to that in just a second. Make the boat 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. See how much simpler it is to read the New Living Translation than actually try to figure out what a cubit is? Verse 16, leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat, put the door on the side, and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. So there's the dimensions, right? It's telling us that's how big it is. First thing that I want to point out that I already stated is that while the numbers are translated in American, right, and for us American folks, it's funny because I grew up so close to Mexico, and when you went and bought tortillas, or let me Americanize that for you, tortillas. When you go and buy tortillas in Mexico, you actually ask for kilos, not pounds. But I never knew what it meant, right? Because I grew up in the U.S., so I had no idea what a kilo was in contrast to a pound. But nonetheless, I don't understand the measurements of the metric system, so it's helpful to understand how big this ark actually is. And a few years back, my wife and my family and I, we went to the Ark Encounter, which is in Kentucky. It actually has a full-scale replica of the ark. It's incredible. If you ever get a chance to do that, do it. It's great. Now, the reason that I pointed out the discrepancy within cypress and gopher wood is because some would say, well, that's the reason I don't like the New Living Translation. It doesn't give you the actual word that is used in its original text. Now, the reason for this is because the type of wood that is described here is not certain. We don't know what type of wood it is. Some speculate that it could be a type of wood based on its durability. Others state that maybe it's a rare type of tree that is endangered or maybe even extinct now. That's a reason we don't know. And the last thing is that it could maybe be describing the process in which you should treat that wood to build the watercraft, right? So we don't know. What does gopher mean? We really don't know. Needless to say, it's not made out of aluminum. It's made out of some type of wood. Searching for Noah's Ark is, once again, not something new. In an archived article posted by the New York Times, back when it was reliable on July 17, 1970, it stated that Turkey, citing security reasons, has forbidden a United States expedition seeking Noah's Ark to climb Mount Ararat. They weren't allowing it. Turkish officials would not explain why they refused to allow the expedition to scale the mountain, which looms 16,945 feet above the heavily fortified Turkish-Russian borders. Parts of it are restricted military areas. That article was written back in 1970. However, since then, people have scaled that region and actually have really looked into that formation. And one of the things that's interesting, and the reason that I pointed out the dimensions is because it's key. It is stated that the dimensions of that formation in Mount Ararat matches the dimensions that are given in the Bible. after measuring the formation, right? This thing that people are saying, what's just a lava flow? This is what it stated. The ground penetration radar revealed a regular interval formation and measured the length of the formation as 538 feet, which is 164 meters, close to 300 cubits or 515 feet of Noah's Ark in the Bible. So in other words, that's the measurements that they ran with. But there's a small discrepancy. That's not the actual measurements that are given in the Bible. And this is where, once again, you have to understand the argument that is being made before you actually say, well, they discovered it, right? The small discrepancy is that it's significantly that area is significantly longer than what is described in the Bible. And the reason why is because it is speculated that what was used to measure out the cubit was not the normal cubit, which is 16 inches, that is normally used throughout the Bible. They believe that it was a royal Egyptian cubit, which measures 20 inches, 0.62. So, as a reference point, you're talking about something that is shorter, the Egyptian cubit is longer, and when you do that, it actually measures out exactly to what the Bible describes. So understand this. I didn't state that because it diminishes the possibility that the ark is actually that formation, but it's important for you to have the information before you make an argument. You have to understand why the argument is being made. Another cool thing about this, though, and I think this is probably one of the coolest things, when they were doing this study of the area, this surveying of the area, they used ground penetrating radar. And one of the things that they found out is that there were perfect intervals that were marked that actually seems to show support beams every so often, right? So if it's a natural formation, it's really weird that there's like these perfectly scattered intervals of beams. It doesn't make any sense. The second thing is, as they were studying this area, once again, they have ground penetrating radar, and they actually found that there was a top layer, middle layer, lower layer, right? It's cool. So, once again, understand that when you're looking at the evidence, when you're looking at this, you have to understand what the whole information is. While we can continually study the Bible and search for evidence that supports what we believe, here is the one thing that we failed to do, and I want to wrap it up with this because I think this is the most crucial part. When we're studying the Bible, and for me, I'm just as guilty as anybody else, one of the things that I want to do, and that I believe most people want to do, is we want to be in awe of what God did based on what we can see with our own eyes, right? We want to be able to support what God did with natural historical evidence. That's what we want to do. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in awe of what God has done. But here's the key. Within the supernatural revelations of all these unique and supernatural events, we often ignore the continual storyline. And that is the storyline of humanity's brokenness. That we are broken individuals, and we often, if not ignore that, we downplay it. In other words, I want to study the Bible and prove that it's true, while ignoring that we're broken people. And the Bible is continually pointing to that. We often think, well, man, people must have been really bad back then, and we're just not as bad right now. As a follower of Jesus Christ, who messes up, who lives a life that is far from perfect, it is discouraging when I fail to measure up to what I hold to believe as what I hold as true, right? When I know that I don't measure up to that standard. But it's frustrating even when people remind you of your shortcomings and failures. And we often want to ignore that, right? We want to focus on the things that will maybe entertain our faith and really push it and propel it to where we're maturing in it. And we think, well, people will often do this, right? They will look to others and say, well, they screwed up this way, they screwed up this way, they screwed up this way. What we fail to do is we often fail to see how bad we truly are. We often look to others to see their failures without looking in the mirror to see ours. And the reason that I say that is because, once again, we often want to be in awe of the things that will, if not stroke our ego, maybe help us to see the Bible and say, hey, I believe that. I believe that, and I'm not insane for believing it. This is what I want you to focus on. Most people, especially in our culture today, we think that everybody's good, right? Everybody's a good person, unless you're in prison for some reason, and depending on that, maybe you're a bad person. Everybody's bad, right? The Bible will say, for all have sinned and none are good. No one is good. Even your good works look like filthy rags before the sight of God. That's what the Bible says, not me. Now, we look at that and we think, man, it must have been really bad back then. And because it says that God saw the extent of the wickedness and that people always look to do what is evil, so that's why he destroyed them. At the end of the flood account, in Genesis chapter 8, verse 21, this is what the Lord says, right? He's making a covenant with Noah. He's making a pact, a promise to Noah that he will never flood the earth again. That's not the way that it's going to be destroyed. Revelation tells us it's going to be destroyed by fire. But, in verse 21, I will never again curse the ground because of the human race. And if you think you're good, right? If we think, well, man, that's so cool that we have evidence for God, let this sink in. Even though everything they think or imagine is bent towards evil from childhood. Can I be even more offensive? If you have children, they're not good. But we don't let that sink in. We simply want to be inspired and in awe of what God has done. We fail to recognize the why God did this. And let me fast forward to the final book in the Bible, Revelation, and why he will do it again. Because people are not good. I am not good. I am a broken man in need of grace and mercy. Your child, my children, I am not good. I will never destroy all living things, and that is by flood. No one is good outside of God. Our natural inclination and tendencies in our broken nature is we're always going to do what's wrong. We're always in rebellion against God. Really the best way to put it is we're like rebellious spiritual teenagers. We never get out of that stage. We're just constantly wanting to be at odds with God. God says do, we don't. God says don't, we do. We don't want to live by Dad's rules. And some people have asked, well, if we're so bad, why doesn't God do the same things that he was doing back then, right? Destroy the people, wipe out and start over. And first off, like I stated already, Revelation does unveil that he is going to do that. But 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9 reminds us that the Lord isn't really being slow about his promise, right? He's going to keep his promise. There will be a day where destruction will come. But he's not being slow about his promise, as some people think. No, he is being patient for your sake, for my sake. He doesn't want anyone to be destroyed, but wants everybody to repent. There's a loving God that I serve. And there is my broken nature, that I'm in rebellion against God. But it is by the grace of his son, Jesus, that I can be reunited eternally with him. God takes no pleasure in destruction. But as a good judge, he is going to carry out justice. But in his loving nature, we're seeing this patience that is waiting for people to repent, right? God wants for people to repent. Now, I know that I mentioned this last week, but one of the many things that I appreciate about this series is how we are able to look at these different topics that some try to debunk and ridicule within the church, but it actually helps us to be able to understand more that there is actual evidence. Now, I know that I've gone along today, and I really want to drive the point home with this topic, because I do believe that it's extremely important to understand that while it's important to understand and to know that there is evidence to support what we believe, I also believe that it's important to understand our brokenness amidst that, right? Being able to balance that, be in awe of the wonder of God, yet at the same time understand our brokenness. And I love that we have been going through this, even though we are unable to change a skeptic into a believer in our own effort. I appreciate that we can be equipped to make a defense for what we claim to believe. Because there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, ignorant Christians who really claim to believe something, but they don't study it to actually defend it. So I really appreciated this series. Now, during the summer, there are teens, and I know that we have some teens up here in the front, but that have gone to camp, and there's others that go to different conferences. Summer is typically a pretty big thing for that, and Lord willing, that was the time where they deepen in their faith. But then there's others like my two oldest kids, who actually went recently and had the opportunity and privilege to go to a conference and sit down and learn and ask questions about faith for nearly 2 weeks. Now, it was a difficult 2 weeks for the parents back at home who are worried for them, but I appreciate that they were able to go and hopefully grow more in their faith. So in just a few minutes, we're going to be keeping it brief, but they're going to come up and they're going to share for about 5 minutes about that time that they had there, where they actually got to ask questions and hopefully, more than anything, encourage us and hopefully challenge us to continue to do that here at home, right? To contend for the faith, to grow in our understanding, to be disciples who are understanding. Then that way we could actually contend, we can fight, we can advocate for our faith from those who oppose it.
I didn't know what to expect. I was hoping for the best.
I was just praying that I would feel comfortable with the people I make friends with.
Before getting on my plane, I was like, God, can I have some good friends that I make here? Because I don't have too many friends at home right now.
Just expecting to learn a lot and to understand more about my faith, to grow and challenge some aspects of my faith.
I knew that they taught really important topics.
Summit has seemed to touch on 3 topics a lot. Number 1, worldview. 2nd, apologetics. And 3rd, general theology.
It's been impactful, especially because they show that they want to be there and they want us to learn. And whenever we have an open forum, I'm always there and I always want to learn more, especially if someone has a different approach to a question.
When I'm around my peers who are engaging with ideas and want to talk about them, who are asking questions, I feel perfectly at home.
I like being active, I like sports. So being able to spend a lot of time with people who are also wanting to play sports, it's been fun.
It's a good time to just let the pressure of everything just kind of fall off and just rest and refresh.
It's so fun watching everybody play like speed volleyball and like ultimate frisbee, and we all just go outside and spend time together. It's really sweet.
Where Christ is present, it's different, and you can tell it's beautiful and comforting, and you grow such incredible relationships.
The small groups is probably one of the best parts of Summit. It's a safe environment and you can talk about what your views are on life. And if you're wrong, they bring up biblical evidence. They show it to you in a loving way, both the students and the small group leader.
Our ultimate need for community is to be in community with God, whether that be like directly praying with Him, reading the Bible, or even just being with His people. I think it's important to be with other people who believe the same things that you do.
Summit is an amazing way to get poured into by people your age and by teachers and staff members, and having people there with you. They either complement your strengths or build you up in your weaknesses. That's probably one of the very best things about community.
Christ is the center. It's not about a summer camp coming to have fun. It's centered around Christ and growing your faith and asking the hard questions and seeking truth.
If you notice that the last 2 weeks were just really quiet and really sad and really somber, that's because me and Micah were gone. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we were gone to Summit in Colorado for 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks. It was like 2 days short of 2 weeks. Summit was founded in 1962 specifically for young adults and teens to grow in their faith and know how to defend it. It was founded in 1962 in a Grandview hotel. That was the hotel we stayed in. The only air conditioning was in the classroom. So it was freezing in the classroom. Everywhere else, including our rooms, were as humid as could be. But it was an old hotel. It was really fun to kind of explore the hotel. It was humid. We had some fans in there, but we learned very quickly that in Colorado, if you've been there before, the weather fluctuates like there's no tomorrow. It went from humid to pouring rain. One day it completely hailed, and then it was sunny. So the weather there was very weird. We found out quickly. The town is also very interesting. It was very fun. We were able to wander through the town when we had our free time, which was about 2.5 hours. There are some hippies out there. You kind of had to be careful. But it was really fun to wander through the town. Our schedule kind of looked like we started the day at 7:15. That's when we ate breakfast. And we had 4 lectures in the morning, and it was 8 o'clock until 12. So it was very long mornings, but we got to learn a lot of different topics, very big variety. We had lunch, then we had another lecture, some free time, then we had supper, and then we had more lectures for the rest of the night. There was also open forums the rest of the day that we could ask questions about the topics that the speakers had talked about. The thing about it is that not everybody agreed, and it was really fun to kind of ask questions about that. It was a wide age range between, also I have notes so that I don't yap away. It was a wide age range of, it was 16, and I think the oldest person was 25, but otherwise it was like 16 to 22. And people from all over the world, actually. There was one from Canada, there was 2 people from New Zealand, and then there was people spread out throughout the United States, which I found out that it was kind of a culture shock that apparently Minnesotans say things very differently. So I learned that the hard way there. Apparently we say bag weird. We also say pop, not soda. We say supper, not dinner. I learned a lot of things out there. The speakers, there was a bunch of speakers throughout the week. We had some that were there permanently throughout the 2 weeks, and then some that came and went. Topics that they talked about was like abortion, different religions was a big one. We learned a lot of different stuff. Like I said, we didn't always agree on everything, but it was a great way to talk to other people and see where people are at with their faith. A big thing that we learned there was called the Columbo tactic. Just talking about, there are so many different things that we're learning in church and all around us. We might not agree. Ask questions. Don't just try to prove your point that this, and this. Learn more about other things, other faith, other religions, other stuff. Learned a lot about that kind of stuff. Just an encouragement. Get plugged in with church, and you might not have the opportunity to go out to Colorado for 2 weeks. It was really amazing. But you do have the opportunity to join churches, to build community, to talk with people. Get plugged in with your faith. But yeah, Colorado was amazing. I'm kind of the last man standing up here, so I won't keep yapping. But yeah, get plugged in. Ask more questions about faith, because there is a lot to learn, and I'm still recovering from the 2 weeks of learning. So that was kind of the cap of the 2 weeks. We also have a video that Micah put together that I'll let you watch so I don't keep yapping.
I was stuck inside that grave a long time. Didn't think I'd make it through the good nights, but you never late, you always on time. Remember when you got me out there, you got me out there, and now I see your blessings every day. Thankful that your kingdom's on the way. Angels all around me, hear them sing like, oh, I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh, rock about the grave that I'm alive now. Devil boy, you out of time now. Spirit moving in me on my fire now. I know it won't ever die out, won't ever die out. And now I see your blessings every day. Thankful that your kingdom's on the way. Angels all around me, hear them sing like, oh, I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live.
Now we're going to prison.
Forever we'll be singing like,
Do it together, we're about to graduate.
I'll never get used to this. From the morning to the evening, I could sing your praise all day. From the prison to the garden, you're the God who's breaking chains. When I look back on my whole life, there's a silver lining of grace. I can't wait to take you, Jesus. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live.